You and I know what it is to be discouraged, to have our life completely turned upside down, and then to experience love, and everything has changed. Hi, my name is Father Mike Manning. God bless you. Thank you very much for tuning in. Today I have a very special friend, a friend that I've known for many years, and yet just recently we got together at Mass, and he said, hey, how about letting me come on your program and let me share the story of what I did? And I said, yeah, that sounds like a good thing. Louie, God bless you. Thank you very much for coming and being with us.
Good to see you, Father.
You got an interesting story, because you can kind of go from something that was a great deal of struggle and pain and well, perhaps even alienation from God and from your family to a change. And then you're really just on fire now to do some really great things with the goodness and the talents that God has. Tell us a little bit about your story, though, would you? Where were you born and raised, and what was your family situation like?
Well, Father, I was born in the Inland Empire, as known as the San Bernardino, the Riverside County area, and where we're at. And so this is where I was born and more or less where I was raised up. But to begin my story with you, to share my story, I would like to start out very early, at the age of 3 years old. Father, my story begins with, I can remember very, very vividly at the age of 3 years old, I find myself, hearing the door, somebody is pounding the door. And evidently I find out that it is my father is coming home. But what I can remember is that my father, he was an alcoholic. And my father had a real major problem with drinking. Well, I remember that one night at 3 years old, I hear my father, he's knocking at the door, and he's yelling at my mother and asking her to open up the door because he wants to come in. But my mother doesn't open the door for my father because she can hear the anger and the rage and the voice of my father wanting to come down through the door. So my mother, I remember very little at that age, that I hear my mother, I see her, she gets all nervous and she gets all excited and scared and has fear in her face. Yes. And while this is going on, I am standing there with her, and then I have my other brother, he's on the crib, and when he hears my father crying, when he hears my father yelling, my baby brother begins to cry out loud and scream. And so all of a sudden begins, and so my mother doesn't open the door, so my father threatens my mother and says to her, open up the door, and if you don't open up the door, I'm going to crash it and beat it down, and I'm going to beat you and hurt you more. So my mother, out of fear, she didn't open up the door. And so what happened is that my father's strength, my father's power, he kicks down the door and he comes in, he rushes after my mother, and he goes right after my mother, and he starts hitting my mother in the face. He starts kicking my mother, and he gets my mother and he throws her to the ground. And I'm there watching this, and my brother's crying and yelling at the time. And what happened is that my mother all of a sudden begins to bleed from her face. And she's weeping and crying and moaning for help, and nobody comes. Oh, wow. From this day, from this time, I never knew how it ended, because all I remember is when I was there, after seeing that, hearing the crying, seeing the blood, and hearing her cry out with lamentation of tears of hurt and pain, I blacked out. All I remember is I blacked out, and then the next thing I wake up in the next morning, and it is over with. And so that's how my life begins, with this trauma, this experience.
Oh, my Louie.
And so from there, the next thing, as I remember, from 3 years old, my mother and I and my brother, we go and move with my grandmother. And so my grandmother takes us, and we live with my grandmother. And so we remain there for the rest of our lives. Meaning, we remain there I'm there from the ages of 3 years old, and 3, 4, 5, and 6 until
Where's your father? Where's your father at this time?
At this time, my father's not with us. My father and my mother are separated.
Okay.
They don't see each other. They don't talk to each other. They're not in contact with each other no more.
But you've got, when this happens, this has kind of set a course of your life, it would, of anger,
Yes.
of violence,
Yes.
and even despair. If you, am I going too far?
No, that's correct.
So tell me, you mentioned to me that you kind of have a history of gangs, and you've got a history of drugs and violence and womanizing and things that were going on in your life. How did this develop now, even from this trauma of 3 years old?
The way this developed, Father, is that after this developed, I realized, I didn't realize then, but I do realize now that the anger and the trauma and the vengeance or the anger or all this hurt that my father had, it carried on to me as I continued to.
You became like your father.
I became like my father.
Wow.
Yeah, I became like my father. I mean, like I said, from that age of from the 3 years old. From the age of 3 years old up to the 4th grade, I was carrying all of this anger, this rage.
And did the anger go towards your mother?
Yes, it did.
Wow.
It went toward. Yes, it did. This anger, this rage I had, it went towards my mother. But the way it happened is this way. I can remember. I'll take you from that scene. Now I'm in the 4th grade, and what happens in the 4th grade? I was influenced by the young men that were there in the 4th grade. And so what happened, I was influenced by them, the way they talked, the way they acted. I was influenced because I wanted to be part of a group. I wanted to become a part of a family. I wanted to be protected. And at the same time, there was a lot of venting and anger inside of me that wanted to come out when I joined the group. And during this time, also what influenced me more in a very powerful way was that my mother's friends and family members in my family influenced me to kind of look at the glory, to look at the power, look at the prestige of being a gang member. You know, I used to get turned on to or looked upon when I used to hear the guys laugh. You know, they used to laugh. They had the pompadour. They had the looks. They had the dress. It was like a charisma. It was like a fire. It was something like, you know, I wanted to be a part of that. You know. And another way that I was influenced is I remember, my mother doesn't remember that I remember, but I remember one night my mother snuck me out of the house with her, and she took me to the school grounds, and she went there to see one of her boyfriends. What happened that when she found her boyfriend, I was there. The next thing I knew, I was there, and I went to play, and then when I turned around, she was gone. Her boyfriend took my mother, and they went away, and I was there. You know, I got scared and I was frightened, and it was dark when this happened, and so it scared me.
You were abandoned. You were abandoned by mom.
I was abandoned by mom. I started feeling the abandonment. I felt alone. I felt unwanted. I felt, here's my mother with me. How could she do this to me?
Yes, yes. One of the big realities of life, especially if there's violence or there's addictions, is this abandonment. This fear of being left alone, and will do anything to try to overcome that. And gangs become a reality, even drugs, and even reaching out to people and trying to have relationships, even if they're not with commitment, holding on to something in order to allow us to overcome that great fear of abandonment. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I'll take off from here too. So for example, right there when I was in the 4th grade, even though I was in the 4th grade, I was already tall. I was a good-looking guy, and I was already influenced by the gangs, by the dress and by the laughter and by, again, that stigma, that strength that I felt when the guys were in the groups.
Well, there was a happiness there too. There was a that you didn't find at home, and the memories of what had happened with your mother.
Exactly. And so going from there, Father, is that right there, I started, all of a sudden, I wanted to graduate. I wanted a little bit more of the action. I wanted a little bit more of the thrilling episodes of maybe getting in trouble, maybe finding out what was stirring me up. Because even at that age, at the 4th grade, I was already thinking about, Okay, I was already thinking about women, drugs, drinking, parties. I was already thinking about that. I'm here in the 4th grade, but as a young man, I was a good-looking guy, and I had a way of talking, charming, conning, convincing women who were older than me because of what I saw, what I went through with my family and all the streets.
Wow.
And a lot of this stuff is that I learned by just watching and observing all the things that used to happen on the streets, or the people that used to come to my house or my family's home, you know, at the time when I was with my grandparents, you know.
Well, you're in the 4th grade, but when did the drugs start to move in? Did that become a factor with this whole gang situation of finding a group of people who would accept you? Where did the drugs start to move?
That's when they started to move. When I found that I was able to be family, I was able to be friends, I was able to feel accepted, I was able to feel this empowerment about my life. You know, I liked it, and so I thought I would jump from there. And so when I started hanging around the older guys, that's when I started getting involved with the drinking, smoking marijuana, you know, sniffing cocaine.
Wow.
That's when I jumped to that part of it. But in that part of it, you know, I liked it. I enjoyed the adrenaline. I did, and then I didn't. It was okay while I did it. But after it was over with, I was back to being lonely, being hurt, you know, and next up.
Okay, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. And I want to hear the story of hope out of what really is a very difficult situation. Stay tuned, and I hope you're relating to this and knowing that God can move in your life in a way that we're going to hear as God has moved in Louie. Stay tuned. I hope I come across as a person who's deeply excited about this ministry. I believe very much in the Lord Jesus Christ. As a Roman Catholic priest, I want to share that message with as many people as possible. Television is the way of doing it. And yet the difficulty is that I'm always kind of on the edge of being able to continue. The bills are mounting, especially with the financial situation that's going on in our country and the world. And it's very, very difficult. Now, I know that you are being bombarded continually by people coming and saying, give me support for this. And the last thing that I want to do is in any way to take away from the money that you give to your parish, the money that you give to take care of children that are dying of cancer, and all of those wonderful concrete experiences. But I do want you to think of the value of what it means to be able to get into the lives and homes of individuals and tell them about Jesus and call them to the most important thing, which is an experience of God and His love and forgiveness. Now, again, as I say, I know you're being bombarded with all kinds of requests, and here I am coming to you again. I'm going to pose a challenge to you. And I know that there are a lot of you there, and again, you're all being bombarded. Would you be willing to send $1? If each of you today would send $1, that would allow us to continue and to be able to get up onto a par with the other programs with equipment and things that we need. I think you can spare $1 as you think of the groceries and things that you're doing. But if you would do that, I know that we could bring about a revolution of success for the program and a deep, deep ability to touch the lives with Jesus' love around the world. Louie, that's a frightening story of violence from your father and your mother even abandoning you, and then now searching for gangs and looking to drink and looking to drugs. Tell me a little bit about where the hope comes in. Was there something even worse that had happened in your life? Can you look back and things, I mean, you're telling me some tough stories. Does that go on for a while?
That goes on for a while. The hope that comes in for me is the hope where I find God.
How did that happen? How do you find God in the midst of, I mean, this is all dead-end streets that you're talking about.
I was only married for about a year, maybe 6 months, Father, and because of my lifestyle and my background, we separated, we got a divorce, and went our ways. But I have to say that part of my early childhood is what caused me to know that what caused us to separate in my relationship.
So you're bringing in all the luggage, and sometimes we ignore that.
Exactly, Father.
Where we come from, and then all of a sudden we think, oh, this is a new person and this is going to be a new life. But you're carrying a bunch of luggage that you really need to get back and face and wrestle with and come to a resolution of peace with it before you can start to live again. Tell me a little bit about the victory, would you? How did you turn your life around?
The way I turned my life around, Father, was that after me and my wife separated and we went our own ways. She went back to her parents. I stayed in town, but I didn't want to end it there. I wanted a little bit more fun. I wanted a little bit more a life of darkness and evil and sin because I was angry and I was hurt.
Tell me though, I'm wanting to know how you got out of this.
After coming back home to Banning, I stayed there with my mother. And I stayed there for 3 months. But in the time that I am there, I found myself walking one night, and I came out into the field, and I cried out. About 2 o'clock in the morning, I was walking on the baseball field up there in my little town of Banning, up there by the high school. And I went out in the field about 2 o'clock in the evening, and I cried out to God, and I said, they say that there is a God, and they say that you are alive, and that you are loving and forgiving and compassionate, and that you heal the brokenhearted. I said, I'm hurting, I'm crying. Where are you? I cried out to him and I said, where are you? And when I said that on the field, I started breaking down and I cried and I wept. Well, there was no God in sight for me, but it allowed me for that time to cry out at that time. And I walked home and I stayed there. And the next morning, I found myself, it was like a Saturday morning, and I just took a walk. Well, when I was taking that walk, Father, I ended up in a Catholic Bible bookstore, not knowing that it was a Catholic Bible bookstore. And the lady who was the owner was a Catholic, okay? So I went in there, and I met the lady that was working there, and then I talked, later on I waited to meet the owner. And so we talked, and we became friends. And she talked to me and spoke to me, and she was a very, very gifted, charismatic woman. She knew why God had sent me there. And she befriended me, started talking to me and spoke to me. And I was there helping her volunteer on Saturdays for 3 months. After that short period of time, she told me if I wanted to move into her family and be adopted to her family. But she told me that she was going to talk to her husband and her children. And after she spoke to her husband and the children, I got the okay. And I was able to move in with this family. And I found the love, I found the peace, I found the joy, and I'll never forget, Mom said to me, I had to go to confession, and I went to confession, and I made a confession. It took the priest to listen. It took 3 hours for the priest to listen to my confession.
Hello.
It took 3 hours, but I'm getting down to the sign of hope. So I'm there with him, and so I move in there with him, and so Mom and Dad told me if I wanted to go back to college, go back to school, that they would help me. So I ended up living there, working there part-time, and I'm going to college part-time. During the time of Christmas vacation, it's time for vacation, right? So we're there. And so we go to San Diego. They have a boat at the marina in San Diego. So my 2 weeks vacations at the boat, at the marina, and there at the boat with the family. But here's the sign of hope now I'll bring to you. Mother wakes, I call her Moms, and to this day I still call her Moms. Sure. She comes early in the morning. I get to sleep on the boat, by the way. I get to sleep on the boat in the water by myself. I didn't know what it was all about, but I knew afterwards that day. So I'm in the boat, and that night, and early in the morning, Mom comes to me and speaks to me and says to me, "Get up, Louie. It's early, and we're going to go to church. I want you to get ready. I don't want you to ask me any questions. Just get ready and get dressed, and we're going to church. We're going to Mass." And I looked at my mother's face, and I knew something was wrong. I'm not wrong, but I looked into her eyes, and I said, "There's something there. I don't know what it is, but I'm not going to ask questions. So I get dressed, and she comes back. We get in the car, and Father, we go to the university, USCD, sure, on top of the mountain there. As you probably know, at one time that school was for men who were. It was a seminary for men who were going to become priests. Well, it all begins there. We come to the top, we park our car, we get ready to go into Mass, and it all begins there, Father. I said to Mom, Mom, whatever you do, whatever, I said, I'm sensing something, I'm feeling something, I'm experiencing something, I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, hold me and don't let me go. And she looked at me very peacefully, quietly, and reverently, as though she knew. We open up the doors. All of a sudden, we walk in, and the choir lot is playing. That big, old-fashioned organ is playing. And I remember to this day, there are priests on the left side, and there are deacons, and there are seminarians at the altar. And I didn't know what kind of day it was. And here I am, we're going to Mass on this special day. And Father, it all begins. The organ plays. I'm walking in with Mom. I'm holding Mom. And long and behold, the compassion of God comes to me. And what do I mean by that? I'm standing there, Father, and all of a sudden we have in our creed the visible and the invisible God. I experience the invisible, compassionate, loving God in an invisible circle, but I'm able to see like a white cloud in the invisible circle, and I feel like the heat, and I feel a power, but I feel a presence of God surrounding me, comes over my body. And I begin to perspire and sweat. But I'm weeping, repenting, and crying and sobbing. And while this is on me, I'm walking and walking and walking. Then the first apparition comes to me. I have an apparition where the encounter of Jesus crucified comes to me as I'm looking like you. In the apparition, he comes with his hands stretched out, crucified, and he allows me to see his agonizing body and movement of his structure of his body. I cannot tell you how long the time or the minutes that he's there with me, but I see that, and it disappears. Then I keep walking and walking and walking, and I end up in the pew. But my tears and my sobbing and the heat that I'm feeling is there, but I'm not crying out loud to cause a disturbance, to cause an action to look at me. But I'm full of tears and weeping and heat and love and compassion. So in between that time and before the gospel is read, again, there's no time and no limit of the described time of God in this eternity of heaven. And what I mean by that, I'm standing there, and all of a sudden I look onto the left side of the church, stained glass. There's the signs of apostles and there are saints. But as I keep looking to the left side of that mirror, all of a sudden, Father, the most beautiful, brilliant light in the Old Testament they call the Shekinah glory comes in a brilliant sun like the moon. But Father, it comes down and moves with light and gold. And as it comes, I am not blinded by the light, but it seems like time stops. Peace, holiness, reverence, the presence of Almighty God comes in through that power of the Shekinah glory. And then behind them I see like silver lights glittering, following this glory of yellow, undescribable of heaven, I could only call it. And there, Father, the Lord himself, the light of the Shekinah glory, mounts around the head of Jesus crucified, his head. And there I am again weeping and crying. And as I stand there weeping and crying, all of a sudden the Lord has more that I can bear. All of a sudden on the left side and on the right side appear two white doves, Father, that come into the hands of Jesus' hands. And from there, Father, he speaks to me. I hear his voice. And I'll never forget those words. And he says to me, "Come and follow me. Do not be afraid, for I will be with you until the end of the world. Come and follow me." It was not an inaudible voice.
Wow, that's great.
But it was a whispering voice that I could hear from my conscience. I cannot explain, from the conscience to the heart.
Yes.
And Father, as he's there, all I can remember is that from there, the same way that he came in with a Shekinah glory, he leaves away, and the white doves disappear from the hands of Jesus crucified were on the cross. Again, I cannot explain time or limit or space, but the next thing I know, I'm back listening to the gospel. And I go to receive him in the body and the blood of Christ.
God bless you. We're going to take a break. We're going to take a break and come back and pray. But God bless you. Thank you, Louie, for sharing that beautiful story. Stay tuned. We're going to come back and we're going to pray that that light can come into your life too. Please, stay tuned. I hope you're as excited as I am at the power of television to be able to bring the good news of Jesus into the lives of vast numbers of people. We're able to do that now. But I've got to share with you, it's tough. A lot of people think because I'm a Catholic priest, I've got the Vatican sending me money or the bishops sending me money, and it's really not true. The way it happens is you are willing to reach out, to pray for me, but also to support me. And I'm going to ask you, in the midst of all the petitions that come to you for support, could I ask you, if you really believe that this can be a powerful way of changing lives, would you send me $1? All I'm asking for is $1. And let that $1 be a dream of a missionary challenge to change the world. Please, I believe in this, and I believe in you. Please, $1. Thanks very much, Louie, for telling us a story of going in one direction, then all of a sudden God reaching down and embracing you and showing you love in a magnificent way. There are people that are writing to us that are asking for prayers that have perhaps touched some of the depth of pain and struggle and separation that you went through, whether it was through separation in their families, through physical problems, through even the struggle with drugs and gangs. Let's pray, Lord. Let's pray over these people, the people at home that are really needing help, Lord. These people are really struggling. Their lives have been overcome, and we've had a wonderful story of how you've moved in Louie's life from one direction to embracing him with a beautiful vision of your presence, your power, and your love. Do that, Lord, for each of these persons, and you at home, as you feel the pain of whatever is going on in your life. Remember this story of Louie. Remember this story of how, when things seemed completely in one direction, God can come in and stir your hearts and call you to the victory and the peace and the hope. And now may Jesus' love for you always make you smile.